Hi, everybody, and welcome to the show. It is Wednesday, April the 30th. I'm Johnny Kane with Sportscaster.com, and this is Open Mic. Now, this isn't a typical sports talk show heavy on opinions, hot takes, headlines of the day. This is more of a show that goes a little deeper into what makes the stories and really who's behind telling the stories. So, speaking of stories, I just flew back from New York covering the Detroit Pistons in the Eastern Conference playoffs last night. And I'm telling you, this team has everybody talking. I met this UPS driver, a diehard Knicks fan on the street in Times Square. He gave me an earful. And then the TSA agent at DTW told me she lives for this. You know, fans are engaged. And if you didn't get to watch last night's game 5, Pistons went into Madison Square Garden, backs against the wall, trailing 3-1 in a best-of-7 series. And they go on to beat the Knicks 106-103. I mean, it was a white knuckler, an all-time performance to keep hope alive. And with the win, it now guarantees that playoff basketball will return to Detroit for Game 6 tomorrow night. So with that in mind, we have a special show laid out that focuses on the Pistons and really about life in the NBA. And the NBA might be a league that, many of you may not be as familiar with as, say, the NFL or Major League Baseball. I've personally been a part of the NBA for the past 11 years, and it's changed my life. It was a good friend of mine, Brian Henry. He's one of the best live game producers I know. He once said, "What a league." And it's a line I use even today. I love working in the NBA. I love what the Pistons as an organization represents in the city of Detroit. And I know it's sometimes overused, right, when we refer to blue-collar attitude in sports. But really, that's what this organization stands for. And if you go back to some of the best years in the franchise, you had the bad boys, right? Tough, gritty, pack your lunch pail group in the late 80s, early 90s. And then it was the going-to-work Pistons in the 2000s. Hard-nosed, aggressive. They played in 6 straight Eastern Conference Finals. And now you look at the present-day Pistons, and they've orchestrated the greatest single-season turnaround in league history. They've tripled last season's win total, and now we're just 2 wins away from advancing to the Eastern Conference semifinals. And the motto for this year's team is back to work. There's no entitlement attached to this team. Our guest tonight, 10-year NBA veteran and a man who spent the past 30 years as a basketball analyst, Tim McCormick joins the show. We'll also hear from TNT sideline reporter Lauren Jabara. Lauren grew up in Waterford, graduated from Michigan, and now one of the rising young sports reporters on national TV. And if you ever wondered what it'd be like to be a beat reporter for an NBA team, you'll hear firsthand from Omari Sankofa of the Detroit Free Press, one of the more talented young writers in our city. And finally, we'll hear from a pro basketball player named Jordan Morgan, starred for the Wolverines and is currently playing in South Korea. It's a full show. We hope it's an enlightening show. And we're going to tip things off with Gio Moceri, recent graduate of Oakland University, who sat down with former NBA player Tim McCormick.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sportscaster.com. My name is Gio Moceri, and isn't it just nice to finally see the Pistons back in the playoffs? With a huge turnaround from the last few seasons with Coach JB Bickerstaff, the Pistons now the 6th seed in the Eastern Conference, currently in battle with the New York Knicks. And joining me today is a fantastic basketball mind from the great state of Michigan, a broadcaster for the Pistons as well. Tim McCormick joins me today. Tim, how are you?
I'm fantastic, Gio. Thanks for having me on. Love talking about one of my favorite topics. I've been a Pistons fan since growing up on the east side of Detroit as a young boy, dreaming about playing in the NBA, dreaming about my favorite team. So I have thoroughly enjoyed the Pistons back in the playoffs and actually winning a game for the first time since 2008. Seems like just an amazing turnaround.
It has been, and I was 6 years old that last time that happened. So just to put some perspective on it for those at home watching. But Tim, from your perspective, I mean, from one year to the other, 14 wins to the 40 plus to get us into the playoffs. Coach JB Bickerstaff, what has he done? What were the missing pieces that he brought to get the Pistons this quick turnaround?
He's an amazing defensive coach. He holds his team accountable. He can be tough, and he can also be encouraging. And I also think Trajan Langdon deserves a lot of credit. There were 2 major flaws with last year's team, Gio. The first is that Monty Williams did not do a good job establishing a defensive foundation. He didn't hold the players accountable. They were very erratic with their rotations. The young guys didn't have a clue what they were doing. And JB Bickerstaff is the opposite. These are our core principles. This is what we're going to do. We're going to do it every game. We're going to do it as hard as we can. And if you don't do it, you're going to sit down on the bench. So that's a great message, especially because the Pistons are so young. The second key is that last year, Cade Cunningham struggled a lot because opposing teams just sagged into the paint and they said, we don't think that this team can shoot. We're going to take away the paint. And there was just no spacing. By adding Tim Hardaway Jr., Tobias Harris, and Malik Beasley, all of a sudden the spacing was so much better, and we saw Cade Cunningham able to drive to the basket. Jalen Duren was able to get his lob game going. And then they added Dennis Schroeder, and he has been the perfect fit because he's a good defensive player, and he allows Cade Cunningham to move off the ball some. So those are the two main reasons why the Pistons were able to triple their win total of 14 from last year.
And what seems so great about it is that, like, a lot of the pieces, like you mentioned, Tranger Langdon, like, made a lot of great additions to add that veteran presence. But a lot of what the Pistons had was already there. It just needed to be tapped into, and it seemed like Bickerstaff was the perfect person to unlock all of that.
Right. And one of the hidden keys is that, yeah, sure, they added the shooters, but those three shooters, Hardaway Jr., Harris, and Beasley, are also world-class leaders. They set a standard for the young guys to follow. They talk to them. And it's also a visual thing, lead by example. If your veteran players after practice are working with the coaches on their shooting, their ball handling, their off the dribble moves, young players don't just leave. They see that and they want to be really good too, so they follow. So not only are our veteran shooters great role models, they're also really, really good at the fundamentals of the game.
And I want to bring it to kind of like a fan's perspective here. And you mentioned it, your love for the Pistons is lifelong. But this is galvanizing for the city, and we got a peek of it when we see the Pistons play playoff games in LCA for, I think, the first time since the building's opened. The electricity in the city is nuts when it comes to this team.
Well, I was obviously there for the broadcast in Game 3, and I had a flashback to June 15th of 2004. That's the day at the Palace that the Pistons beat Kobe and Shaq, won an NBA championship, and the building was electric. The crowd was going crazy, and I saw and felt the same vibe in Game 3. The Pistons fans were such a strong impact. And what happens is I saw a ton of young people wearing their Pistons jerseys. And guess what? They're hooked now. They experience something that they love. And when you look at the Pistons roster, there's a lot of young players that are going to continue to grow. So this Pistons surge of enthusiasm and quality play is going to do nothing but improve. It's going to grow, and all these young fans are going to be hooked for life.
And I want to ask, like, we mentioned the young players, and there's that mix of young and veteran presence. And when it comes to being in the playoffs, how important is it to have guys who have been there before to guide the young fellas when it comes to the bigger stage of the playoffs? Because it's different, and you see it every year that the adjustments need to be made for it.
Well, in Game 1 in Madison Square Garden, you know who wasn't very good? Cade Cunningham wasn't very good. Jalen Duren struggled. Asar Thompson had a poor performance because the game is just incredibly fast in the playoffs. I remember my first NBA playoff game ever. I sat back and said, oh my gosh, I can't believe how hard everybody was playing. Every possession was critical for success. And then Game 2, those guys all played much better and led the team to victory. So The other factor is that Madison Square Garden is different than every other building. During my NBA career, I played in 8 different um, professional venues: Madison Square Garden, the LA Forum, the Chicago Stadium, the Palace. I experienced the different arenas, and Madison Square Garden is the hardest that I ever played in. And I think that caught our Piston young guys off guard. So all of these experiences will make them better. And now they're coming from a place of experience and knowledge. When they're in the playoffs next year and the following year, they are going to be the dominant ones that say to the young players, you guys can follow me now. I've been through this. I know what to expect.
And then when it comes to the home court side of things, so Madison Square Garden is its own zoo and it's nuts in there. But the first game back in Detroit for game 3, that crowd was intense as well. When you're the home team and you have such a hungry fan base like we had at LCA, can that sometimes play against you? Could that be like too much at once? I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it can. And what I would say happens is that when you go on the road, and I used to love being on the road because of the fact that it's a close-knit group that's coming together. There are no distractions at all. You go to shoot around practice, you have your video sessions, you get your rest, you get a great meal. Maybe you do something that's focused on solitude more. Like you might go to a movie the night before the game and just kind of like think through things. When you're at home, you're worried about tickets, and there's an internal pressure where your fans are so loud. You can see how much they care, how passionate they are. And in some ways, it makes it harder. Going on the road, it's a singular purpose. We've got to win this game. We're here as 12 people together. We've got our coaches. We've got our game plan. We're going to win this game. I'm not saying it's an advantage to play on the road, but I'm saying I can understand what you're saying.
Well, Tim McCormick, thank you so much for joining us here on Sportscaster.com. If you at home want to learn more about Tim McCormick and his background and how deep his roots are here in the Michigan basketball area, then we got a giant interview for you guys here on Sportscaster.com. So be sure to log on and get your Tim McCormick goodness there. And we wish the Pistons good luck on the rest of their series against the New York Knicks. Thank you very much for joining us, Tim.
My pleasure, Gio. Good talking to you.
Tim McCormick, one-time Mr. Basketball Award winner for Clarkston High School and a member of the Michigan Hall of Honor. He's a terrific person, wealth of knowledge, and you can see him regularly on FanDuel Sports Network Detroit as one of the pregame analysts on Pistons Live. When we come back, a day in the life of a beat reporter covering the Detroit Pistons. Stay with us.